I have sat on this bench for 44 years. I have sentenced killers. I have watched mothers collapse in my courtroom. I have seen evidence so disturbing I had to recess just to collect myself. I have looked into the eyes of men who felt nothing and men who felt everything. I genuinely believed that after 4 decades in this robe, nothing could reach inside my chest and rearrange something. And then one morning, my clerk set a manila folder on my desk, and I want you to understand something before I tell you what was inside it. That folder did not contain a murder case. It did not contain a kidnapping or a fraud that wiped out someone's life savings. It contained a parking ticket, a traffic stop, and a detention report. 3 of the most routine, unremarkable documents that pass through a courthouse every single day in this country. And yet what those 3 documents revealed, when I laid them side by side on my desk at 8:47 in the morning with my coffee still hot, what they showed me about what is actually happening right now in America in 2025, in cities where people are marching and screaming and holding signs outside federal buildings. I had to stand up from my desk and walk to my window and just stand there, because I realized in that moment that almost everyone arguing about this issue on both sides, loudly, passionately, on television and social media and in Congress, had never once looked at the actual court records. And I had. And what I found is going to change the way you see this entire debate. But I am not going to tell you yet what was in those files, because if I tell you right now, you will not understand why it matters. And I need you to understand why it matters. Before we go any further, if you have never subscribed to this channel, do it right now. Not because I am asking you to, but because what I am about to walk you through over the next several minutes is the kind of story that the news channels do not have the patience to tell. And you deserve to hear the whole thing from the beginning to the very end. Hit that subscribe button and stay with me, because this story is not over until I tell you what happened to the little boy. And I promise you, when we get there, you will understand everything. My name is Judge Judy Perlman. I have presided over municipal and appellate cases in this country since 1981. I have worked in 3 different courthouses in 2 states. I have seen the law applied beautifully, and I have seen it applied like a weapon. I wake up every morning at 5:15. I make my coffee the same way my father taught me. Black, strong, no sugar, no ceremony. My father was a union electrician from Pittsburgh who believed in 2 things above everything else: that a man's word was either worth something or it was worth nothing, and that the law existed to protect the weak from the strong, not the other way around. He never went to law school. He never stepped inside a courtroom in his life, but he understood justice better than half the attorneys I have faced across my bench. I carry those 2 beliefs into work with me every single morning. They are the only things after 44 years that have never let me down. My clerk's name is Dominique. She has been with me for 19 years. She knows my moods before I do. She can tell from the way I walk through the door whether it is going to be a long day or a longer one. On the morning of March 17th, 2025, I walked in, and she did not say good morning. She just looked at me with an expression I had not seen on her face in years, not since we handled a wrongful conviction case back in 2019 that still keeps me up some nights. She handed me the folder and said simply, "Judge, you need to read the one on top first." That was all. No explanation. Just that. I sat down, I opened the folder, and I read the name on the first document. Rosa Elena Medina, 39 years old, legal permanent resident of the United States for 12 years, mother of 3 children, ages 6, 10, and 15, all 3 of them born in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. All 3 of them American citizens. And on the morning of February 28th, 2025, at exactly 7:22 a.m., while those 3 children were getting ready for school, Rosa Medina was stopped at an interior checkpoint 6 blocks from her home. She had her green card. She handed it over immediately. She was polite, she was calm, she did everything right, and she did not come home that night. But here is the thing I have not told you yet. Rosa Medina was not the story. Rosa Medina was just the first page. There were 46 more names in that folder behind hers. And when I finished reading all 47, when I had gone through every detention report, every timeline, every authorization form, I picked up the phone and I called a federal judge I have known for 22 years, and I said, Patricia, I need you to look at something, because either we have a catastrophic systems failure happening right now inside a federal agency, or something far more deliberate is going on. And either way, somebody needs to be held accountable. What I found in those files, the pattern, the memo, the name that appeared on 39 of the 47 authorization forms, that is what I am going to show you. Section by section, document by document, exactly the way I saw it. And by the time I am done, you will not need a protest sign or a cable news opinion to know what you think. You will have read the records yourself. And the records, as they always do, will speak for themselves. Rosa Medina had lived in the same row house on Cambria Street in North Philadelphia for 9 years. She knew her neighbors by name. She brought soup to the elderly woman next door when she was sick. She paid her taxes every single year without exception. She had filed her citizenship application 14 months before that morning. The paperwork was pending, moving through the system exactly the way it was supposed to. She worked the night shift as a nurse's aide at Temple University Hospital, the overnight stretch from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., the shift nobody else wanted, the one that paid just enough extra to cover her daughter's asthma medication and her son's glasses, and the heating bill that always seemed to come due at the worst possible moment. She had been doing that shift for 6 years. 6 years of coming home in the early morning, getting her kids fed and dressed and out the door, then sleeping 4 hours before picking them up in the afternoon. That was her life. Not glamorous, not easy, but hers. And she had built every inch of it with her own hands. On the morning of February 28th, she finished her shift at 7 a.m., said goodbye to the overnight staff, and drove her 2017 Honda Civic toward home. She had exactly 40 minutes before her 10-year-old son Marcus needed to leave for school, and she always walked him to the corner herself, every single morning, without fail, because the intersection at 5th and Clearfield had no crossing guard, and a bus driver had once blown through the stop sign while Marcus was crossing, and Rosa had decided that morning she would walk him personally until he was old enough to drive himself. That is the kind of mother she was. She never made it to that corner. 6 blocks from her house, on the intersection of Lehigh Avenue, there was a checkpoint, not a border, not a port of entry, a street corner in the middle of a residential neighborhood in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. She rolled down her window. She handed over her green card and her driver's license without being asked. The agent looked at her documents, looked at her face, and told her to pull to the side. She asked why. He told her it was a routine verification. She said she understood, and she pulled over. She sat in her car for 40 minutes while they ran her documents. The verification came back clean. Legal status confirmed. No criminal record, no violations, no flags of any kind. And then, instead of handing her documents back and sending her on her way, a second agent walked over, opened her car door, and told her she needed to come with them for further processing. Further processing. Those 2 words, I want you to sit with those 2 words for just a moment, because when I read them in that detention report, I had to read the sentence 3 times to make sure I was understanding it correctly. Her status had already been confirmed. There was nothing left to process. And yet Rosa Medina was placed in a detention van at 7:58 a.m. Her phone was taken. Her car was left on the street. And her 10-year-old son Marcus stood at the front door of their house on Cambria Street that morning, backpack on, waiting for his mother to come walk him to the corner. She never knocked. He waited until 7:45, then walked to school alone through the intersection at 5th and Clearfield, with no crossing guard and no mother watching from the curb. Rosa spent 11 hours in a detention facility in Northeast Philadelphia. She asked 4 times to make a phone call. She was told someone would bring a phone shortly. No phone came for 6 hours. By the time she finally reached her sister, her children had already been picked up from school by a neighbor who had seen Marcus arrive home alone to a locked house and called Rosa's emergency contact out of concern. Rosa's 15-year-old daughter had called the hospital, called Rosa's cell phone 17 times, and had finally sat her 2 younger siblings down on the couch and told them, with a steadiness no 15-year-old should ever have to find, that everything was going to be okay. It was not until I read those words, written in a flat, bureaucratic font in a government detention report, that I fully understood what was actually happening out there on those streets. Not the version being argued about on television. The real version, the one measured in missed phone calls and children sitting on couches and mothers pressing their foreheads against the cold wall of a detention room, wondering what their kids were eating for dinner. And Rosa Medina, I need to remind you, was one of the legal ones. After I finished reading Rosa's file, I did not move on immediately. I sat with it for a moment the way you sit with something that has genuinely disturbed you. Then I turned to the second file, then the third. Then I stopped counting and just read. I read for 4 hours straight that morning. Dominique brought me a second coffee and I did not touch it. I did not look up. I did not take a single phone call. Because what I was seeing across those 47 files was not a collection of isolated incidents. It was not a series of mistakes made by overworked agents in the field. It was a pattern, deliberate, documented, and signed off on by the same name over and over again on 39 of the 47 authorization forms. That name was Deputy Field Director Alan Mercer, 54 years old, 23 years with the agency. And in those 23 years, Alan Mercer had built a career not on accuracy, not on legal precision, not on protecting the rights of the people his agents encountered in the field, but on volume, pure, raw, reported numbers. The more detentions his division processed, the better his performance reviews looked. And his performance reviews, I found when I requested his publicly available federal employment record, were outstanding. Commendation after commendation, award after award, all of them citing the same thing: high operational output, exceptional detention metrics, outstanding field productivity. In other words, this man was being celebrated, formally, officially, in writing, for detaining as many people as possible, as fast as possible, regardless of what the documents said when they came back clean. But here is where it stopped being a management failure and became something else entirely. 4 months before Rosa Medina was stopped on Lehigh Avenue, Alan Mercer had distributed an internal memo to every agent supervisor in his division. I obtained a copy of that memo through a federal court filing, and I want to read you exactly what it said. Not my summary of it, not my interpretation, the actual words. It said, "Field operations are not to be delayed or suspended pending documentation review. Detain first. Verification runs concurrent with transport. Do not allow paperwork status to dictate field decisions. Detain first." Those 2 words. He put them in writing. He sent them to every supervisor in his division. He signed his name to them. Name too. And then 39 of the 47 people in that folder, 39 human beings, most of whom had their legal status confirmed within the first 2 hours of detention, were held for an average of 9 additional hours after that confirmation came back. Because Alan Mercer had told his agents in plain written English that the paperwork did not matter, that they should detain first and sort it out later, and the system rewarded him for it. When I laid that memo beside Rosa's detention timeline, beside the 11 hours, beside the 6 requests for a phone call, beside Marcus waiting at the front door with his backpack, I felt something I have not felt on this bench in a very long time. Not just anger. Anger I am used to. What I felt was something colder than anger. It was the specific, clarifying feeling you get when you realize that what you are looking at is not an accident. It was a choice. A deliberate, documented, authorized, rewarded choice made by a man who knew exactly what he was doing and did it anyway, because the system he operated inside gave him a trophy for it every single year. And that is when I picked up the phone and called the federal courthouse. That is when I stopped being a reader of these files and became something else. And what I did next, the 22 pages I wrote that weekend, the 3 federal judges I called, the 2 colleagues who told me to stay in my lane, that is what comes next. Right now, I need you to do something. If this story is making you feel what I felt sitting at that desk, if it is making you angry or heartbroken or both at the same time, hit that like button right now. Not for me. Hit it because Rosa Medina's story deserves to be seen by every single person in this country. Hit it because 47 names in a folder deserve more than silence. And subscribe if you have not already, because the next part of this story, the courtroom, the hearing, and what Alan Mercer said when he was finally made to answer for that memo, is something you cannot afford to miss. The federal review hearing was scheduled for April 9, 2025 at 9 a.m. in courtroom 7 of the federal courthouse on Market Street in Philadelphia. I had submitted my 22-page referral 3 weeks earlier, citing specific case numbers, detention timelines, the Mercer memo, and a statistical breakdown showing that 66% of the 47 detainees had confirmed legal status at the time of their extended detention. 3 federal judges had read it. 2 of them had called me personally. The third had forwarded it directly to the Department of Justice Oversight Division without saying a word to me first, which told me everything I needed to know about how seriously she took what was inside it. 12 of the 47 cases were selected for the expedited review hearing. Rosa Medina's was the first on the docket. I was not presiding that morning. I was sitting in the gallery as a referring officer, which meant I was there to observe, not to rule. The presiding judge was Federal Judge Sandra Okafor, 61 years old, 30 years on the federal bench, a woman I have respected deeply for 2 decades because she has never once in all those years allowed the weight of a case to rush her or the pressure of a room to bend her. She walked in at exactly 9 o'clock, sat down, looked at the room for a long moment without speaking, and then said, "We are here today because someone took the time to read the files. Let us make sure that time was not wasted." Alan Mercer sat at the respondent's table in a charcoal gray suit. He had the bearing of a man who had sat in difficult rooms before and walked out of all of them unscathed. His agency's legal counsel, a senior attorney named Douglas Hale, sat beside him with a leather portfolio and the practiced calm of someone who had defended institutional decisions for a living and considered this hearing a formality he would be through by lunch. Rosa Medina sat in the gallery in a dark blue cardigan, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes forward. She had brought her 15-year-old daughter with her. The girl sat beside her mother with the same stillness, the same quiet dignity, and I thought about that couch. I thought about this child telling her younger siblings that everything was going to be okay. And I had to look away for a moment because I was in a federal courtroom and I needed to hold myself together. Judge Okafor called Rosa's case first. She walked through the detention timeline methodically, point by point, reading directly from the file. Stopped at 7:22 a.m., status confirmed at 9:14 a.m., released at 6:47 p.m. She looked up from the file and asked Douglas Hale one question. She said, "Counsel, can you provide the court with a documented justification for the 9 hours and 33 minutes of detention that occurred after your agency confirmed Mrs. Medina's legal status?" Hale opened his portfolio. He shuffled papers. He cleared his throat. He said that field operations involved complex judgment calls that could not always be reduced to a simple timeline. Judge Okafor did not raise her voice. She did not change her expression. She simply said, "That is not a justification, counselor. That is a description of uncertainty. I asked for a documented justification. Please provide one." Hale looked down at his portfolio again. The room was completely silent. He said there may not be a specific document addressing that particular window of time. Judge Okafor wrote something down. She did not look up when she said, "There may not be," or "There is not." Hale said, "There is not, Your Honor." That was the moment. That was the Alan Mercer version of the confession made in open court. Not dramatic, not loud, just a senior attorney sitting in a federal courtroom, unable to produce a single piece of paper justifying 9.5 hours of detaining a legal resident whose status had already been confirmed. Judge Okafor then turned to Mercer directly, not to his attorney, to him, and asked him to explain the operational memo he had distributed in October 2024. Mercer leaned slightly forward and said that the memo was intended to improve field efficiency and that it had been mischaracterized in the referral. Judge Okafor picked up a copy of the memo, read the words "detained" first out loud into the official court record, looked at Mercer over the top of her glasses and said, "Deputy Director, in your professional opinion, what part of these 2 words has been mischaracterized?" Mercer had no answer. His attorney touched his arm. Mercer sat back, and in that silence, in that single moment of a powerful man having no answer to a simple question, 47 names in a folder got something they had never been given before. They got to be heard. Judge Okafor recessed for 40 minutes after Mercer's silence. When she returned, the room felt different. The kind of different you feel before a verdict when everyone already knows what is coming, but nobody speaks it out loud yet. She sat down, arranged her papers, and then delivered her ruling in the measured, precise voice of someone who had chosen every single word carefully and meant all of them. She ruled that 29 of the 47 detentions reviewed were unlawful under existing federal immigration statute. Not borderline, not debatable, unlawful. She ordered compensation proceedings initiated for all 29 individuals. She entered a formal finding that the October 2024 Mercer memo constituted an unauthorized operational directive that directly contradicted established agency protocol and federal detention guidelines. She referred the memo and the pattern data to the Department of Justice Inspector General for a full independent investigation. Alan Mercer was placed on immediate administrative leave before he reached the parking garage. His division was placed under a federal compliance monitor. The detained first policy was formally rescinded by the agency's regional director in writing before the end of that same business day. 23 years of performance awards and commendations could not protect him from 2 words he had put in writing himself. Rosa Medina's citizenship application was expedited through a priority review process. 4 months after that hearing, on a Tuesday morning in August 2025, Rosa Elena Medina raised her right hand in a federal courthouse in Philadelphia and became a citizen of the United States of America. Her 3 children sat in the front row. Marcus, her 10-year-old, wore a clip-on tie that was slightly crooked and refused to let anyone straighten it. Her 15-year-old daughter held her phone up and recorded the entire moment without crying until the oath was finished, and then cried so hard that Rosa had to hold her up. I was not there that morning, but Dominique found the courthouse photo online and printed it and put it on my desk without saying anything. I came in, sat down, saw it, and did not touch it for a long time. I just looked at it. A woman who had done everything right, who had been failed by a system that was supposed to protect her, standing in a federal courtroom with her hand on her heart and her children beside her. That photograph is now framed on the wall of my office, next to the crayon drawing Marcus mailed to the courthouse 3 weeks after the hearing. He had drawn a woman in a black robe holding a gavel. Underneath it, in careful, deliberate 10-year-old handwriting, he had written 6 words. He wrote, "The judge helped my mom." I have read those 6 words every single morning since. Some days they are the reason I put the robe on. Here is what I want you to take from this story. Not the legal ruling, not the administrative leave, not even Rosa's citizenship, as beautiful as that morning was. What I want you to take is this. The protests that erupted in 34 cities across this country in the spring of 2025 were loud, they were passionate, they were full of people who genuinely believed something was wrong, and they were right that something was wrong. But the protests did not find that memo. A 22-page referral found that memo. The marching did not produce Rosa's citizenship, the court records did. Anger without documentation is a feeling. Anger with documentation is a case. And cases, when they are built carefully and presented honestly and heard by judges who still believe that the law exists to protect the weak from the strong, cases change things permanently, on the record, in ways that cannot be undone by the next election or the next news cycle or the next administration. My father used to say that the courtroom is the last room in America where money and power and connections have to sit down and face the same thing everyone else faces. The truth, written down, entered into evidence, and read out loud by someone whose only job is to apply the law equally to everyone in the room. I have spent 44 years trying to be worthy of that room. Cases like this one remind me exactly why. If this story moved you, if Rosa's name means something to you now, if Marcus and his crooked clip-on tie and his 6-word crayon drawing means something to you, then do 3 things right now. Subscribe to this channel because I have more files on my desk and more stories that the headlines are not telling you, and you deserve to hear every single one of them. Hit that like button because Rosa Medina's story deserves to reach every corner of this country. And share this video with one person, just one, who argues about immigration but has never once sat down and read an actual court record, because the records, as they always do, tell the truth. And the truth, when enough people finally hear it, has a way of changing everything. I will see you in the next one.